It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and I thought that I would bring another fellow Latina therapist to talk all about growing up in a Latino household, how that shaped our values, our mental health, how we take care of ourselves, and a little bit about our entrepreneurship journey and challenges that we face being Latina therapists. I am so excited to bring my friend Deyanira Cavazos, who is also a therapist here in Texas. She is based out of the Rio Grande Valley, which is kind of close where I grew up in. Deyanira is also a content creator and a YouTuber, and she also specializes in working with Latina women. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited. I've already introduced you guys to Deyanira. Deyanira, I am so glad that we were able to connect today.
Me too. I'm really looking forward. I've been looking forward to it for a long time.
I did tell everyone that you have been a big time supporter of me. And I was so excited whenever you started following me because I didn't know other people who kind of came from like the same area I was born in and who were also pursuing therapy. Cause I feel like, at least over there where I live, because I'm from Laredo, Texas, a lot of it was just education, nursing. Like you would get into those kind of careers that okay, like they have good benefits, they pay good, and like being a therapist or a psicóloga or anything like that wasn't like a thing.
Yes, for sure. Even within my own family, it's mostly like teachers, nurses. So when I was like, hey, I'm going to be a counselor, excuse me, what is that? What are you doing? It was very shocking for sure. I'm the first therapist in my family.
Me too. And I remember when I first told everybody, ay, vas a ser psicóloga para los locos, and I'm like,
Yes.
no. I was like, trust me, we all go into that category crazy.
Yes. It was very similar for me. Like a lot of the comments started coming up of, you know, you're not going to make money in that. Like, who actually needs that? You could be doing so many other different things. I relate to that so much. Yeah.
I definitely want to get into a little bit more about our journey as like becoming therapists and like entrepreneurship. But because it is Mental Health Awareness Month, I thought it would be perfect for us to talk about Latino, Latinx mental health and just like our personal experiences. And you have you sent me some bomb ass questions, and I'm so excited to piggy off of those because they were amazing. Like it really got me thinking, like, whoa, like what was it like growing up in the
Yeah.
Latinx community? I'm curious because I'm not sure. Were you born in the Rio Grande Valley?
So I was born and raised in McAllen, Texas. And I mean, Laredo, McAllen, we're pretty much neighbors, pretty much.
Yes.
I was in the RGV. So I was born and raised there and have stayed in my hometown like for my whole life. Even now that I work, I'm based there, even though I work virtually now.
That's amazing. Would you guys like cross the border a lot? Because that was a thing in my family.
Yes, up until I was 15, like Sundays were the day. Like my tia would come pick me up. We would go to Reynosa and like get our favorite tacos, get our favorite things, go to my grandma's house. Like it was a whole thing, and I miss that so much because it's been a while since I've been able to do that.
I just came back from Nuevo Laredo because my mom had to go get like some medical stuff done over there. And it's just crazy. Like we would always go over there for like dentists, like when we got sick or anything like that, because I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the Mexican pills, but they were better.
Yep.
And just like the quality of care over there, I feel was a lot better. Like you wouldn't have to wait so
Yeah.
long to see someone.
Yes, even just medication wise, like if I was sick and there was an emergency, my mom would like, ¿Quién tiene las pastillas? Whose friend has something? Or like they would go to the farmacia, the pharmacy over there, because it was just quicker. And I'm so grateful that we did have that because there were a lot of emergency situations sometimes.
And I also loved going over there because it's like your opportunity to go get like, candy and like at the farmacia, you get all those things.
Yes, I always felt so embarrassed because I didn't know how to count the pesos. So Prima would always have to come with me, and they're like, "You're not from here," because I wouldn't know how to count it.
I felt so proud of myself this past week where that I went because I was like, "Oh my god, mom, I did it. I know how to count pesos." Because I was like, so we would had like teníamos los pesos and then we had the coins, right? And I was like, she's like, "You need to use the coins." And I'm like, "No, because I'm gonna be there counting." And like I fear that people are gonna be mad at me because I'm like taking so long. But yes, yes. I mean, don't feel bad because I'm now 29 and I'm just learned that the currency.
That's good to know. I wonder if that's just an us thing, like an America thing, where people get very impatient with you when you're counting, or if it's more normalized over there. Because I would never have people like rush me when I was over there and we were like trying to buy our stuff. But I don't know if that's just my experience.
Girl, I don't know if it's like a Hispanic thing, like a Mexican
Uh-huh.
thing of like just being rushed. Cause like growing up, I
Yeah.
felt like apúrate, like, you hurry up, do
Yeah.
this, do that. Like it was never like patience was not a virtue of my family.
hmm Now, as you're saying that, that makes sense. It's almost like there was in my family there was patience for some things, but for other things, it always felt like we were in a rush. Like apúrate a limpiar, visita's coming. Like just constant rush where we didn't know how to just rest. For sure.
Exactly. Which brings me to how mental health was addressed, right? So like patience or when you were struggling with something, or I don't know, maybe you didn't experience that growing up. Did you have any mental health struggles growing up that you would like to share?
So at the time that I was not aware of what anxiety was, but yet I dealt with it a lot. You know, I had a lot of like social anxiety or also just anxiousness generally all around about a lot of different things. And it's something that shows up in my family too, but there was no name for it. So whenever it would happen, it would be like go rest, you know, go sleep, kind of sleep things off, and tomorrow will be a new day. So it wasn't, we didn't really have a name, you know, for things like that when we experienced it. And it was more like, let's deal with it over the counter. You know, you need ibuprofen, here you go, because you're not feeling good. But yet it was like, oh, I'm having a panic attack. You know, this is something different. So even just self-care, you know, things like that. We didn't have a name for things, but now that I'm an adult and I am a therapist, I realize there were certain ways that we cared for our mental wellness, but there were no words for it. It was more of like, okay, you know, let's rest for a little bit, take a siesta. I had a tia who was really big on that. And I remember just laying there on Sundays, like not knowing how to go to sleep because that was not normalized within, you know, my household. As I start thinking about that, that was crazy, just even not that being normalized.
We didn't have words. It would be the evil eye, agente soho, and that's why you're feeling off, right? Somebody, ay, alguien te está haciendo brujería.
Yeah,
that's why you're feeling off. Like you're not being productive, right?
yeah.
So maybe that's
Ponte a
why.
limpiar. That's why you're bored.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah,
you
that's
don't
why
feel
you're
good.
bored. Like growing up, I would hear like I don't have time to feel that way, right? Like I mejor ponte a limpiar, like no tienes like ¿para qué tienes esos pensamientos, right? No tengas esos pensamientos. Almost like don't have anxiety, right? Like calm down. Kind of gives the same vibe. But again, like parents didn't know. I mean, in our culture it was like celebration and parties and like alcohol and like all that, at least for my family that was how we like coped with things. Um, but then kind of similar to you, this idea of like, if I was feeling off, I know like my mom, my grandma, my grandpa would be like, ¿Quieres que te traiga de comer? Like that was a big thing of like taking care of each other as a group. It wasn't necessarily like individualized help. It was more so how can we help like the group collectively? Let's pray about it. Dejamos a Dios. And like things like that were things that's how we addressed our mental health. Also, like playing outside was a very big thing growing up. I had so many primos, primas. We were all born in like the 90s, like 93, 92, 91. Everybody was pregnant, which was, I'm so appreciative of it because I said this the other day of like, I didn't know I was poor until I got older.
Oh my God. Yes. Even just as you're saying this, I just found out not too long ago that Chocomil, I don't know if you grew up drinking Chocomil, but I saw like it's basically like Nesquik and milk, the way that my family would make it. And I recently saw a video of how they make it in Mexico. And I was like, this is like, there's so many steps here. So I was even thinking about like our immigrant parents, how even just what we eat, we've had to kind of modify when you grow up being low income. So
Like, I didn't even know we were poor. Like, my grandma worked so hard to like give us, to finally like build us a house and do all those things. We would live in trailers, like those trailer mobile homes. And she would remember she purchased like the land first, and then everybody kind of had a mobile home. Like I think we had like two in the lot, and then eventually my tios like bought their own land, and then like they left. But I would notice that like that we were really poor. I remember the lights being out at some point, but ni en cuenta, like didn't even know that
just
that
life.
was something. Like I didn't even know that that was something. And then I think middle school came and people started wearing Abercrombie.
Oh my
I
God.
can't even say that word, Abercrombie. I can't even say it right. But people started wearing Abercrombie and
Yeah.
Hollister, and I remember like, whoa, like I can't really afford that. Like I can't,
Yeah.
like maybe one item, but I can't. Like I remember having a friend who would like her mom would take her to San Antonio, and they would like get like basically like an Abercrombie haul, like a bunch of clothes, and I was like, oh, like I can't afford that.
Yes. And I wore, because similar to you as you're explaining this, there were times growing up where my parents started off, our house didn't have air conditioning, like their family helped them buy the land, gradually built it. And me and all of my primos and tios lived in the same like street, in the same colonia, basically. So if it was after school time, I would bike over, to my primo's house. We all lived very close. And I grew up pretty much wearing Walmart clothes the whole time, my whole upbringing.
They call me the
Uh,
Walmart baby. Like my mom, she
Yes,
was like, "You were the Walmart baby," and I remember loving the movie. What's that movie? The movie where the girl.
where she gives birth in the Walmart.
Yes, and I love that movie.
I always used to dream about what it would be like if I were to just stay overnight at a Walmart, like what I would buy, what I would do. Yes.
Yes. So that was what it was like for me, like growing up, like being a bunch. I think too, I think my mental health was better as a child because I was always around people. Now I feel as an adult, like life is a little bit more isolated. Like I feel like it takes so much time and effort to talk to people. And I think too, I'm living in Dallas. A lot of my family is in Laredo. So I don't have like when I go to Laredo, I constantly see like my primas are there at my mom's house. They get coffee and things like that. And that's how like, oh, I don't have that. And so when I'm there, I'm like, oh, this is nice. Like this is great. So you are still living in your area. So is that something that you still like get to enjoy?
I do. It definitely hits different when you go shopping and you just hear Spanish all around you, or you just see a lot of representation. It's a different thing. Like when you come down to the valley, you go to the carniceria or you go with your mom and run errands. And it's a little different in my family now because we've lost a lot of the family members who used to really do a lot of those things, like Sunday mornings, go get the pan dulce. And so something that we've tried to do within our family, at least me with my parents, will try to incorporate that a little bit because it kind of got lost, when you start to lose family members who are very much tied to that, because it's almost like you don't just lose a person, you lose all of the things that they represented within your family and culture.
Like they're the
Yeah.
glue keeping everybody, kind of together. And I think that there was like mental health addressed, like both spoken and unspoken. I think unspoken would be like my mom, even after an argument or a fight, oye, ¿quieres que te haga algo de comer? Like that's her saying sorry. Me feeling sick, her rubbing my back. When I would cry or have, and again, at the time, I didn't know I had any anxiety or panic attacks, but I would like have panic attacks and I didn't know. And my grandma would be like, then, like, she would give me Diet Coke. And I don't know now, but I associate Diet Coke as like something that calms me. I don't drink Diet Coke anymore. It was only something that I would do when I was younger, but I like little things like that, like offering something,
Yes,
like
para el
some type of,
susto.
like something for, for like to share, to show you that they care, It might not have been words of affirmation all the time, but it was definitely like those unspoken ways of taking care of one another, which I love.
I know, like, it's just so hard because so many of our parents are trying to meet those physical needs for us. Like, how can I physically show up there for you? And they didn't know how to really do that emotional component. And I relate to that a lot as you're talking about it. Just, even my mom praying for me at night when I was having, an anxiety attack because it was time to start a new school year, or just, all of these little things that I can see now.
I was definitely an anxious kid. Like when you would go to Walmart again, Walmart stands here, and they had those like all of the papers for each grade and what you needed to have for your school. Girl, I was like, Mom, I need this, and this. And I remember at the time I was like, you don't need all of these, and her telling me like you don't need all of this, but also like we can't get all of these things. Like it's not feasible. So those are little things that I remember growing up. But there were also some not so great things growing up. And I think it was more so when I moved to Dallas or would travel or when I worked at a restaurant that I noticed and we'll call them like microaggressions, we'll call them what they are. I'm curious, did you have any experience in that? Like any microaggressions growing up in the valley?
Growing up in the valley, not so much, but sometimes, I mean, it's hard because you experience them from both ends, right? Where it's like from those in Mexico who, for example, view you as, oh, you can't really speak the language, or I would get it more when I started working than in childhood. I wasn't very much aware. Maybe I did, but I started noticing more around my college years where I would be in the workplace and, oh, you speak English so well, or I would get so eloquently, you speak it so eloquently. And I used to take it as a compliment. I knew something was kind of weird about it because I mean, normally when you're in your community, no one says that to you really, like unless you're truly just practicing speaking English or Spanish. So to have just a stranger, who isn't Latina come up to you and be like, "Oh, you speak it so eloquently." It's like, okay. And I don't think I started noticing till later.
Almost like they expect you not to speak it eloquently. And I think that is the problem. Because I remember I worked at Texas Roadhouse, which is, like a steakhouse. And I had already graduated from high school. It was kind of like first year of college. And I remember serving this family that they were traveling. There's a white family. Like the mom and the dad were like, wow, like your English is so well. Like you speak so well. And I was just taking it aback. I knew better back then. I was just like, oh, well, I'm from here. Well, I'm from America. Like, just like you. Like,
Right.
I remember saying that and like they were like taken aback, oh, like realizing that they said something that was kind of off putting. And then here, I remember when I moved to Denton, which is a lot more white people, but is a lot more diverse too. And even then, to noticing how like the stories that I was told growing up, because I think too, like even when I started dating like my husband who's white, like it would be like, oh, I could never, marry someone that's not part of my culture. It's like different. I remember getting that type of feedback from friends and things like that and feeling just like, oh my gosh, like, wow, like even art, like we can be, you know, not, I don't think it's hate towards someone else, but like just like not unsure about how that would work.
It's coming from this different place because for me it was similar where like one side of my family really praised and idolized whiteness, where it was like the colorism, it'd be like just stay out of the sun, because you're gonna get too dark, and things like that. And then the other side of my family, it's like, oh, you married someone who's white, like ¿quién es este? Like who, apprehensive and scared. So I got to kind of see both sides, which was really confusing, to kind of figure out and sit with because for me, I thought that I would never really marry someone outside of my own culture until I met my husband and just him as a human being and as a person who cares about these things that I also care about that affect my culture. But it is something that I think we continue to try to figure out and talk about. It's so complex.
No, I agree. I agree. And it's definitely a lot in like the family dynamic and just
Mhm.
like bring, but I do get to, I had my friend's mom. Like I remember the
Yeah.
first time I brought Adam and they were like, "Oye, está bien bonito," and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, "You never say this about anybody else." Like don't get me wrong, my husband's handsome, but like, and then my cousin recently came. She's 12, 13, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, there's so many white boys with colored eyes." She's like, "All we have in Laredo is Edgar's." And I'm like, "Don't say that." Have you heard that? Like the Edgar's, like the Edgar haircut. And
Yes, and oh, it's such a hard topic to get into because even now as we're talking about, I don't know if you feel similarly. I feel like a knot in my throat as we're talking about it and thinking about, well, what will my family think if they hear me talking about these things? So much tied to our culture too of not even wanting to talk about these topics out of sake of not making the family look bad. But I think it's important too because it's not okay.
no, I agree, and that brings me to what you wrote about like growing up Latinx. Like, what were some of the things that you value from our culture, and which are the ones that you chose to evolve? And a lot of that is like for me is like the familismo. Like that's what I love, the dedication, the commitment, the loyalty to family. But that had to evolve too. Loyalty to family. It had to evolve because I think too, and let's just say it was a argument between one family member and another family member, and it wasn't right. Like it was maybe messed up. And other family being like, well, that's your tío or that's your tía or that's your dad or that's your mom, right? And it's like, but no, like, yes, he is my mom. Like, yes, my mom, yes, my dad, yes, my tío, but what about me? And that's very much where that like the individualistic like hurt that you feel, it's like some kind of like, no, you gotta brush it away for the sake of keeping the family intact.
Yes, that pressure that you're talking about where there's a lot of things that at least in my family too and friends heard growing up of ¿qué va a pensar la familia? Or ¿qué va a pensar la gente? There's like this huge concern of how your actions or what you do in life reflects on your family and reflects right on the collective.
Do you think, and this is a thought, do you think that that is like a cultural value of like caring what we think about other people, or do you think it has more to do with America, like coming to America, and like more so like what are people going to say because we're so afraid of like standing out and being ourselves and being like just because for me like I wouldn't wear hoop earrings, I wouldn't wear anything like growing up that would make me look ghetto, that would make me look too Mexican, that would make me look whatever. And it's so sad now because now I'm like, wow, like now it's a trend. Like now it's like no, my culture's not a trend
Yeah.
here. There's so many
Yeah.
times where I didn't feel comfortable wearing those things because que va a empezar la gente, or like how are people going to see me? Am I automatically going to be seen as the person like, given a side eye?
Yes, like that whole clean girl, era thing, right? Where it's like, I was so scared to even wear these things because I would be signaled out. And that's because I even lived in a predominantly Hispanic community. I would still get the comments of like, oh, you're wearing Walmart clothes because there were like more rich, Hispanics in my area too. And I was on the low income side. And it's interesting thinking about how I think the immigrant experience is unique. It definitely is. And how a lot of that trauma from those experiences that probably go back even before we can even think of or our parents can even think of that they've affected us, in our families. Because sometimes I sit and think, where does this actually come from? And I'll ask my mom, and she can't even tell me either. And I'm like, well, why are we doing this then? you know?
Like why do we care what other people think? Like, ¿qué va a decir la gente? Like, what gente? Like, who are we trying to impress here? Like, who, you know? I think like that for me has evolved, that like the loyalty to family. I think too I had to put a lot of boundaries in terms of like my own mental health and how I felt about certain issues. And I think that that was very important. I think too, religion for me, I grew up Catholic. I did my quinceañera, did my like where you go to the church, and I did my confirmation, all that stuff. But again, that was something that I personally had to didn't resonate as an adult anymore with, and had to kind of, isolate myself from that. But I still do believe in a higher power. I just didn't believe in like the Catholic Church as much, and like the just the beliefs that it had. That's something that evolved for me.
I hear you on that because very similar. I think I've gone through a lot of like deconstructing, right? Like with my faith and things that I felt like weren't really fitting me anymore, which is a huge thing within my own family where they were more like Christian, non denominational type. And so a lot of that went into my brain too of the pressure of, oh, you don't feel good with your mental health. No, no, no. You just need to pray more. You just need to go to church more. And so for me, as I grew up and developed my own self identity, I was like, some of these things, they're just not vibing with me anymore. They're not helping me. My mom sitting by my bedside and praying for me when I was anxious, that was helpful. But being told just pray more because I'm anxious and God will take it away, that I realized that for me wasn't helpful. So I resonate a lot with what you're saying right now, where we just have to let go of certain things that aren't helping us anymore. And that's okay, even though it can be really hard.
Or adapt the story that we're telling ourselves. Cause I had this kind of like conversation with the client about, mom wanting to pray for the anxiety and feeling like that's just not enough. Like, and I said, well, remember that that's a tool that she has, that she learned. Let her pray for you. Let her know that, hey, like that's something that I'm going to do as well. But your prayers are stronger. You've been doing this for like you've been doing this practice for such a long time. Like, I want you to pray for me, you know? And that's okay. That could be one tool in your toolbox, having family pray for you. It doesn't have to be the end all be all. And also rewriting the script that if they tell you just pray, it doesn't mean that they're just saying, you don't have to accept it as like, just do that and it will go away. It could be like, do that and other things as well. Go to therapy, do all these other things. Like you can rewrite the script. But if we say, oh, my mom only wants me to pray and it go away, then we then start feeling resentful that our parents can't understand beyond that. But how can they if that's not something that was accessible to them or learned,
I talk to clients a lot too about that grief that we experience, right? And knowing that our parents will never, like, they can try, but their worldview has been there for so long, like tracing back generations. And it's finding that balance, like you're saying, where you know what, I put healthy boundaries up so I can still have a good relationship with my mom because she's also working on that relationship too. And she's trying. So if her way of showing love is this way with boundaries, like I will accept the prayer, like you're saying, but don't pressure me into doing things that I don't want to do. And finding that balance is super messy and hard at first, I think. Very emotional.
It's not easy too, because I think for our parents too, when we say no, it feels like a rejection. It feels like, ay, no me estás haciendo caso, you
Yeah,
know?
te crees
And
mucho,
see,
ya que estás educada.
the
Yeah.
disrespect, right? And I think for them too, it's like at some point they're like, oh, like my son, my daughter, they're leaving me behind, right? With they're educated, they know so many of these things, and I don't understand them. It's very tricky to talk about in therapy about these things, but they're so important because I think sometimes if you go with a therapist who doesn't bring in your culture or, is not culturally competent about things or open to having some tough conversations, because I've had other clients who are not Latinos in different cultures, and I don't want to assume that it's a certain way, right? And so yeah, it takes time, but that is definitely a value I, liked about family, like just like always offering help and support. Something else that I really liked, well, at least in my family, we had a lot of chingona women. Like we had women, the amount of painful experiences the women in my family have endured, I am so proud of them because they have so much resilience. I could never, but like, man, like they hold the pain. And again, not always a good thing, but damn, like they've hold painful experiences and had to raise children and do all these things while simultaneously dealing with mental health issues that were never addressed. Like that's for me, I'm not saying like that's the right way to do it, but I'm just saying like wow, like they survived.
So that's something that I've been grieving in my own personal life, like just thinking of my great grandma who had to literally run away from her home and start negocios, like little stands, little negocios, like to work her way down to Mexico to eventually immigrate. And I'm thinking, I've been grieving a lot of how some family members almost sacrifice almost everything about themselves, for us to be able to now walk more gently, and they had to run, for us to be able to do that. And it's very complex because there's like joy in it, but also a lot of sadness and hurt. But I love recognizing, like you're saying, a lot of chingona women like starting negocios with nothing. And I'm like, I'm over here stressed, and worried. Let me channel some of that energy from my ancestors because they did it. Oh my goodness.
And doing so much with so little. Like
Yeah.
my grandma, like, she was only receiving her like social security check, but I estaba ayudando like everybody. And at the same time, my grandma, like, help yourself first, girl. But that was her role. Like she being a mom never stopped for her, even when she wasn't, older, because she was helping everybody else, right, with very little to no money. Like it also like impacted her well-being. So yes, there's like a there it's not black and white. Like there's such a gray area, and so there's like beauty in it, but there's also like I wish now, like I my grandma passed away when I was I hate saying it because it always makes me teary, but when I was 19, and it definitely like changed the dynamic of the family. Like I know earlier you mentioned about how there's usually family members who are holding things together, and like, we what love about them is like the celebration, going all out, getting dressed for occasions, like really celebrating each other and really celebrating the holidays. But that definitely kind of went away when a lot of like main family members, passed away.
For me, it's my grandma too. So as soon as you say that, my grandma was so special to me. Like she was just the person who understood me. And so when she passed away or died, it's been a long road, to healing from that, but it still never is the same because I still cry, when I think about her, because all of the sacrifice that she made while still being such a gentle and caring human being. I was like, you are my blueprint when I think about like a balance of what it looks like to, have to sacrifice or work hard or hustle, to do the things that we have to do as children of immigrants, but also hold space for gentleness. Like I used to just show up on Sunday mornings. My grandma would be there watching cartoons and be like, come lay down, like just come rest. Cause she knew that in my household, it was very much like with my mom, it was very on the go. Like my poor mom, always having to work, especially in her early 30s and 40s, since she was 19. So I resonate a lot. As soon as you said grandma, I'm like, yeah.
My mom had to work really young too. She, had me at a really, really young age, and same thing, and I think, my grandma like was a lot more dura with her, like a lot more hard because she had to grow up because she had a baby, and she was a lot more gentle with me. So I kind of saw that, like loving my grandma, but also like seeing like the dynamic with my mom, like I wish things would have been better for them. And I think things got better for them, later on before she passed away. But I think also there's a lot of things that we always wish like we could do. Even now, I was telling my mom, because I just went to the radio, right? I was telling her, I was like, oh, I wish I could have, like, I wish that grandma was alive, because now with everything that I've accomplished, like I would have loved to chiflarla. Like I would have loved to be able to just like give her experience that she never got to do because she always had to be working or figuring things out, or like having to take care of me because you were working. Like, there were so many things that our family again sacrificed for us.
As you're mentioning that, I have similar feelings of wishing that my grandma could see this now, things like that throughout my day. Like, oh my God, her mind would be blown because she would see me studying, in my bachelor's before she passed away. And so It's hard because I like to think that she can still see it from where she is, but no es lo mismo. You know, you wish they were here.
What year did your grandma pass away?
She ended up passing away, and I can't even remember the full year. That's how traumatic it is for me.
Yeah.
But I remember just graduating with my bachelor's, and that was in 2015. So around that mark, you know, it took me a
Gotcha.
while to even take her flores, you know, because it was just so painful. But even as we're talking about it now, I'm like, hey, look
I
at us
know, it's like,
go.
this
We're
is
talking about
grief, right?
this.
Grief, like, never that's the thing about grief, like, it never goes away, like, it comes in spurts, and they keep even talking about it, like, I can't even go to my grandma's grave because I will have a full-on panic attack, and that was something that I had to put a boundary in because my family is like, "Ay, tu abuelita se va a sentir bien mal because you never
Yes.
visit her."
Yeah.
And it's like, but I do talk to her, like, I do,
Throughout my day.
throughout my day, like, I just can't, like, for me, like, I'm not gonna serve anybody if I'm there and I'm literally having a panic attack because of how much pain, and I'm thinking of, like, when I have time, like, long-term time there in Laredo, that I could gradually expose myself, because it is definitely something that I want to do. I want to give her flowers and things like that, and again, that's something that my family values a lot, like poniendo, flowers in el panteon, like, that is something that they value. It means that you care, like, you're visiting, even taking care of the grave is so important.
Yes, for sure. I barely, you know, after many years was able to go with my mom. So I would have to constantly like tell her like, give me time because even what happened, you know, there's like so many family dynamics and things that go on with family when sometimes someone passes away. So I would tell my mom like, give me time. Like things were painful. Let me work up to it. But yes, when I finally was able to go, it was very special. I let myself cry because it was very emotional. So I think in your own time, you know, just like with anything else, gradually working up to it.
I think that was the very first, because my grandma died and then my cousin died before that, but like they came in like three. So like everybody passed away in about a year and it was terrible. But I remember that was the first time that I knew I was struggling with depression. For me, majority it's always been like anxiety, but I was definitely struggling with depression after multiple deaths in the family, and I would be doing impulsive things that I like now I'm like, what were you doing? Who were you with? Like, why? I'm glad that I went through them because it made me learn a lot about myself. But I was like, I don't know how I was functioning. Like, with I got my first. I remember I had gotten my first C while doing my bachelor's, and I was like, why did I let myself do that? Because I've always been a straight A student. So, and I remember, wow, what am I doing? Like, what am I? And I never told anybody, never asked for help, never told people how I was feeling, which now that I'm seeing, like the things that were coming up in our culture was doing things and assuming needs, never asking for help was something that I grew up with.
Very similar, where I look back at teenage me, you know, and young adult me going through these like deaths of family members and just all of these things that do impact our mental health in so many ways, and just feeling like I'm drowning and I can't ask for help because if I do, it'll be more of, well, go to church, you know, pray about it. So just sitting in that silence and growing up, all I wished was, oh, now that I am a therapist, I wish I had had a therapist, you know, when I was that age. And I think that's also why I love working with adolescents now too, because I'm like, I wish I had that. So
And I think that too, that's like very similar to my story. Like, I saw family members struggle with substance misuse and, depression and anxiety. And I just wish that there was, and trauma, like just traumatic experiences
trauma,
that they
yeah.
never like talked about. And I wish that there was access to being able to see a therapist. Even when I did my bachelor's and I had access to it, I didn't use it. It wasn't until graduate school that I actually kind of went to therapy and, like really experienced it for myself. And it was so helpful to do it because, like, I was still holding that like chingona mentality. You could do this, like, you're surviving, like, you're getting out of here, like, you're doing your own thing. But learning a lot of those patterns that I'm like, they're not going to help me in relationships. They're not going to help me, find someone that can truly be like my partner, because that was also something that I let go, like this idea of machismo and the patriarchy. Like I like, just like the man goes to work and,
Goodbye.
because that wasn't
Yes.
my experience. My mom, like my dad wasn't really in the picture, so my mom worked. My grandma worked. Like, and I feel like my grandma and my grandpa like were very much equals in that. So I
Yeah.
never really did that, but my tios and my primas and things like that, they were more like the man works, the wife
Yes.
stays at home.
Are we the same? Because similar, my mom and dad really chose to break away from that, like to the point where my dad would even buy us like a GameCube to me and my sister. He was like, "You guys can do anything a man can do." He was very much like that because we just talked about this. They were just over here this week, and my dad was mentioning how growing up he would hear things from his dad of, "Ay, pobrecito, you have only daughters. You won't know what it's like."
Ooh.
So it
Yeah.
does run in my family, but I'm proud of my parents. That was the one thing that they were able to really break away from. And it comes up sometimes for them because it's been in our family for so many years, but we talk through it. That's also something else that I'm very proud of. Do you feel like there's certain things within your family too that you've been able to kind of work through that maybe you didn't think you would be able to at one point?
Oh, hell yeah. My relationship
Uh-huh.
with my mom has gotten so much better.
Yeah.
Like, I did a lot of things to make it that way, and a lot of hurtful things to her that I know, like, hurt her, but also, like, helped me grow and helped us grow. Like, running away in the middle of the night. Like, I did that. Like, I did that, like those kinds of things. And I'm glad I did them. Like, again, I wouldn't have learned a lot of these lessons and we wouldn't have healed our relationship. Don't get me wrong, we still have our little tits. But I love my mom. She is an amazing woman. She's so independent to a fault. I think so too. I would love to see her, find companionship, but I also know that she has so many like family that love her, and then she's okay. I'm grieving too that my little sister is going to college, and I'm like, what's gonna happen? My mom's gonna be by herself, like, and I told her, I was like, are you okay? And I started to realize, so I was talking to my therapist, started to realize that this is gonna be the first time that she can finally only think about herself. And I'm kind of excited for her
That's
because
huge.
all her life she had to be thinking about me and my sister, and it's hard for her to take care of herself, when you have kids. Like, I think that's a big thing in my culture. Like, their kids is like a, what is it? Like a lion, like, not, what's not, it's not the lion. What's the female version of a lion?
A lion?
Lioness.
I don't know.
Lioness. I
I'm
don't
like,
know, girl. I don't know, but like, like pouncing,
yeah,
like protective, and and
yeah.
so I'm just excited for her, but I'm also like a little anxious.
Yes, I think we had a bilingual brain moment because my mom will say that sometimes, like, soy una leona. She'll say that in
uh,
Spanish sometimes because, oh, yes, that's such a special thing. The fact that she will have that time. My mom is also going through this phase where I'm like, you don't have grandkids. It's just you and dad. You're getting to kind of go on vacation now and do things that you couldn't have done, when we were growing up and you had to care for us. And I think a lot of our moms heard even the messaging of your life is over. When you have kids, it's all about your kids. And that hurt them, in so many ways. They deserve to also care for themselves. I think things would have been so different if they would have also been able to hear messages like that, like, you matter too.
and now I'm very good about like saying, like, if I know, like, if I see, I try not to assume that they're upset or anything, but I'm like, I'll ask, like, do you need anything? And I know sometimes they'll be like, I want to do this. Even just the changing because sometimes when I ask, do you need anything? The response is going to be no. But if I said, I want to do this for you, it's a lot more accepted because it's like, okay, they're not being a burden to you. You really genuinely want to do this. And I think that has really held, because I think in our culture, we grow up to just serve others, hospitality, serve others outside of the family. And then it's hard to kind of communicate what we need as individuals. And I know that I now have more control with that with my family and how me and my husband can break the pattern. Because now when I'm upset, like I'll revert back to like, he needs to know that I'm upset. Like he'll figure it out. I'm gonna tell him. And it's like, what? No, he's never gonna know. Like my husband could be like playing video games and like be like ignorance is a bliss until I tell him like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling overwhelmed or I have these things coming up. And so you could be like, oh, okay, now that you've told me, like I can do this. Like I can do this or I can adjust my schedule or I can do that. And that has been something that has evolved from my family values.
I love that because I think it's so unrealistic to put the pressure on ourselves to think that those things won't come up for us. They've been in our family generations for so long. Like we will have a brain malfunction moment where we go back to something that we saw growing up. And I think the most that we can do is be aware, be self aware, and catch it when it happens and gradually, come out of it. Because, same for me, I'm like, okay, I notice that I'm expecting my husband to know this, and I have to kind of sit with it for a moment. I'm like, no, Deyanira, he's not gonna know. No te conoce. I know your mom told you growing up that they would have to just know you because they love you, but some things my husband can read my mind about. We're there, but I can't assume that. I have to be able to communicate it. So I love that you brought that up.
Right. And there's some scenes where I don't even know myself. I don't even know what I
I
want. So like
know.
how can I assume somebody else knows what I
Yeah.
want? But yes, and there's like there's a thing on TikTok, like if he wanted to, he would. And I'm like, if you ask. Like I think sometimes there's gonna be some things that in your relationship you're gonna want to let people know. Like it's important to me that you when we were doing long distance, me and my husband, I said it's important for you to text me good morning. Like it signals to me like that you're thinking about me, and even though maybe all day because you're busy in grad school I don't get to hear from you, like at least I heard from you in the morning. And he's like, I'll try. And then he told me, but you have to allow me to fail. And that was like, okay, I can't just I just can't request perfection. Like, when we're asking people to break behaviors or add a new behavior or a habit, like it's important to fail, in order to learn.
Yes, because even for me, as you're bringing this up, it was because I was the oldest sibling. I am the oldest sibling, not was, in my household. It was important for me that my husband understood, like, hey, I've only ever served, like, even that parentification role. Like, I've only ever been there for my mom, been there for my younger sister. Like, it's not something that I feel bad about, but I have to recognize that it did impact me and it did hurt me. And so having my husband just say, how can I help you when we were dating? And I was in grad school, it's like, I can't go out on dates, all the time. So if you're just sitting here with me while I'm working on my homework, he's like, done. That's what you need. Well, I'll sit in silence just so you can be here. So that communication component is so important. Because if you wouldn't have done that, then I'm like, I got to move on because even just as Latinas, there's so much sacrifice still that happens where we're already sacrificing spending time with family and carrying so much on our plate that we need people around us who understand what that's like or who try to understand.
And I think that's something for me that one of the reasons why I did move, from Laredo, because I think I really just needed my space to grow for the things that I wanted to accomplish. I knew that it would be harder. I hope one day that we are closer, or that my mom moves over here. I doubt it, but that we are closer with family. But even same thing with my husband. Like we live kind of in the middle of both of them. And I think for us, that was part of our healing journey. But yes, too. So I don't relate as much to that because I will say, I think because we're so far away, we've been kind of a little bit isolated from family issues, which again could be a blessing, but also could be like we don't always know what's up, what's going on, or they don't tell us and then we find out last minute, right? So again, like there's good and bad, right? But totally get it. I think again, when we talk about family dynamics and things and what is important for your mental health, it really just depends on what works for you. There's no right or wrong way. And I hope people listening to this don't feel like no one's going to judge you for whatever you decide to do for your mental health. It's going to take healing it with your family and like learning that dynamic, but only you know your family, only you know you and what works for you. And
100%. Like boundaries that work for me might not work for another family because maybe they've experienced, high severe levels of abuse, so for them it's not even possible to sit down with their mom, and talk through some of these things because they know how their mom will react. And so their boundaries would look totally different. I love having those conversations with clients too, so they can figure out, okay, what boundaries actually work for me. I love that.
And I think too, because I think it's also like the grieving in that, like, oh, like I going over to a friend and then like they have like family dinners and things like that, or like you see like the nuclear family, like very, and they're like, oh, I don't have that. Like I remember I was like, oh, Father's Day. I'm like, I don't have that. Like, but I had so many amazing men who were like father figures for me. And so like little things like that that I had to learn and grieve that my family just looks different. Like it's not going to look like everyone else.
And I love that we both get to talk about our experiences because, like you're saying, sometimes it can be so easy to just group us all together. And it's like, no, we each still have our own unique way that we grew up. There might be some similarities there, like the fact that we all feel pressure to have to clean our house now, because we grew up having to clean when the visita was coming. There might be certain things that we have in common, but there's still like very subtle differences because we each grew up with different parents, different stories in our families.
Every person who is a minority is going to have very different experiences. I'm very grateful that my upbringing, I didn't feel like a minority. I felt like the majority. It wasn't until I like left that I was like, oh, there's more people out in this world other than me, and exploring dating other people of their cultures and things like that. Like that was interesting for me too, because it was not something that, again, not that there was hate, but more so that there was like uncertainty or just like lack of knowledge of like what that would look like. Because in Laredo, it was very much, you marry another Latino, you know?
And it's interesting because, like I said, I grew up with like both sides. So me, I wanted to just marry someone within my own culture. I was like, someone who isn't from this culture won't understand like these really tough family dynamics for me. How will I explain that if my mom, is sick when she's elderly, that I can't just put her in a group home? Not that there's any shame around that for anyone, but with my family, it was just so normalized that you have to take care of your mom, she lives with you when she's older. And at that age, I thought I have to do things exactly the way that I was raised. I have to do things exactly like that. So there was a lot of pressure for me of, well, I have to find someone who understands this exactly versus when I started to explore my own self needs and what I actually wanted, what would be okay, that I realized this matters, but I more so just need someone with me that can try to understand my culture, be mindful of it, and understands also the barriers for me as a Latina. So, and is willing to have those conversations. That I think is something that was important to me now as an adult.
I feel like that's a whole other podcast about relationships and like
Oh yeah.
marrying someone from a different like that's a whole other podcast. But yes, like it all goes back into like mental health and how you feel. Like I honestly, I was very intimidated dating someone white, knowing that they've only dated white people because I was like, I'm not as pretty again, like how confident, like the things that we hear in the media about like not being, Latinas are not pretty or like, like the whiteness is superior or whatever, like those kinds of things that I felt that like really messed up with my confidence. And it wasn't until going to therapy and really just like being able to just be myself. And I feel now, like I mean, as I'm getting closer to 30, I feel so much more myself. I really did just detach myself from my culture for a while when I lived here. And now I'm like really trying to go back and like really, really, I don't know if it's the age going to 30. I don't know what it is, but that's like what, and I want to be real because I think nobody talks about that. Like when we kind of isolate ourselves from our community.
Yes. And for various reasons, right? It might have been trauma related. It might have just been realizing like I don't even have my own thoughts. All I carry within me are what my family wants me to do. I'm not my own person. So I think to a certain extent, it's good to create some space, between, okay, this is what I grew up learning, but what do I actually believe? And I agree. In my 30s, I'm like, ooh, I'm feeling myself. I thought that like my life was going to end after 30 when I was younger. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm just living like now.
30, flirty, and thrive. Well, maybe not flirty, but like flirty with the hubby, but
Yes.
and thriving. No, I'm excited. I'm excited. Nervous, but excited. I told my mom like in her 30s how she felt, and she was like, I loved my 30s, but for her 40s are like where it's at. Like she feels like it's been awesome for her. When did you start going to therapy, or have you gone to therapy? Because I feel like people assume that every therapist who's a therapist has gone to therapy, but not everyone has.
I have not. And that is something that I'm looking forward to. I've already prepped my family and have told them I'm going to get my own therapist. I had wanted to ever since I was in grad school, but could not afford to at the time. I was just still very much low income. You know what it's like for LPC associates, like all the things we have to pay for and just everything I couldn't afford to. And now that I can, shout out to my own therapy clients. It's crazy how like all of these things are full circle where it's like you can now also take care of yourself. And so that's something that I'm excited to do and to normalize, because no one in my family that I know of has gone to therapy. So it's going to be an emotional thing, something that I'm excited for, to just have my own safe space the way I create for clients. Like I crave it so much right now. I just want my own safe space.
I love that. Like I mean, it was like grad school. I started going to therapy when I met Adam, which is my husband. And that like really, really helped. I just got out of a relationship. All the deaths in my family, like I really needed to process. And even then, I wasn't even ready to talk about them yet. Like it's funny because like we think like, oh, you go to therapy and you're just gonna want to like you can go into your own pace. And I very much told my therapist, like, I want to go to my own pace. Don't pressure me. If I don't want to talk about my childhood, if I do, like, I will, but like, don't pressure me. I need to do it on my own time because I don't want to feel like it's just flooding everything. I want to feel in control. Like, that was the thing. And again, the issue about like control, I just want to feel in control. So it was very like, you're going to keep control, but at the same time, I'm going to challenge you. And I thought that was a good, like, happy medium. So it's great. I'm glad I asked you because I was just curious because I think we like always say like therapists go to therapy. Yes, but like it's not always at a young age or at a, and that's why we became therapists. Sometimes it's because I want to learn all these things. For me, it was learning. Like I have no access to this, so I want to learn. I want to learn how to take care of my mental health better. And eventually, when I have access to the means to do it, I can do it.
Yes. And for me, therapy wasn't even normalized until I was in grad school, not even my bachelor's. When I was, on my way to doing this, it was until grad school and even after, being able to create these safe spaces for clients, because I knew at the root that it was something that I'd like to do, but it wasn't just not financially feasible, but also just not accessible within my own family, where I was still in a place where I felt pressured to have to tell my parents everything or to have to tell my family everything, that I couldn't keep things to myself, which I know is another topic.
What a different dynamic because I had the opposite. Like my mom was very reserved, very like we didn't talk about stuff. Like she never pressured me to tell her. She was always very open. Like when I got into relationships and things like that, or when I was 16-year-old, drinking and like things like that. She was like, si vas a tomar, mejor dime dónde vas a estar para que te recoge. Like, like those kinds of things. Like, so I love that dynamic because she knew like she knew what she did when she was that age. She was like, I'm not gonna like limit her, but I do want to have her safe. And so, like, I think too, we prioritize privacy, like keeping things for ourselves. But again, there's that other extent of like not waiting to tell you bad things till the last minute. And was not okay. But I'm so happy that we got to do this. Where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Instagram, on TikTok as Coach Mental Health Services. And also, if you are an LPC associate or a counselor in training, therapist in training, you can find me on YouTube under Keep On Growing.
Yay! Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica.